heat, and I don't think anybody passed out, so that was pretty amazing. But great day. I appreciate that. Hey, we also have a list with the 30 guys that are on it, but anybody else who would like to be involved in outreach, single moms ministry, love out loud, maybe going to pray for somebody in need. Andrea has a list back at the sound booth, and if you would like to be on an email list that when special occasions come up, an opportunity for practical ministry, we'd like to have you on that list to sign up. And Andrea's got a big thing of cookies back there. Anybody who signs up tonight gets a cookie. So what are you going to do? They're pretty good cookies, though. Also want to introduce to you our next series. We have tonight, the Christian man as a father. Next week, the Christian man as a minister. And then the following week, we're going to go back to a video. I know it's not as exciting as having Pastor Fidel here, but it's called The Christian Atheist. It's believing in God, but living as if he didn't exist. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, yeah, I'm a Christian. 92% of people in America say that they're Christians, but yet, where do we see it? How does that practically work out? There's a disconnect somewhere, and there's a disconnect for all of us at times where we believe in God, we trust God, but there are times that we live like he doesn't exist. And great series. I've been reading the book that goes along with the series, and I have learned so much about being a Christian, about Christian ministry, about the little decisions. There are no little decisions. Every decision is important. It all creates who we are and leaves a legacy. So, hey, if you got your Bibles with you, Proverbs 27. Today is April 27th, so you should be in Proverbs 27, being in the Word every day as a Christian man, letting the Word of God wash over you. So Proverbs 27, a couple of highlights that we'll read. Proverbs 27, verse 2, let another praise you and not your own mouth. Let someone else and not your own lips. Verse 6, it says, better an open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. An enemy will tell you what you want to hear. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you should be offended. You should be angry. But a friend, wounds from a friend who calls you out and tells you like it is and say, you know what, you are not seeing things right. Your judgment is off. Wounds from a friend can be constructive rebuke. Verse 10, do not forsake the friend of your father, and do not go to your brother's house when disaster strikes. Better a neighbor nearby than a brother far away. Verse 12, a prudent man sees danger coming, and he takes refuge. But the simple keep going, and they suffer for it. And the last one of my favorites, Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And how we're better together than any of us could be on our own. We need iron to be sharpening iron. In your small group, you have 10 other guys who live life with you. They know your background. They know where you're at. They know where you're hoping to go. They know your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, and they want to walk with you on the journey as a Christian man. So just want to remind you, fathers, you're going to leave a legacy. A good legacy or a bad legacy, but you're going to leave a legacy. And there are other men at work who are watching your life. You call yourself a Christian, and you are. But yet, what kind of a legacy, what kind of an example are we setting? We're all in ministry. We are all in leadership. We're all leading someone. There are people watching us, and they're looking for the reason for your hope. Why are you different? Why don't you cheat? Why don't you lie? Why don't you steal? Why are you so different? If I was in your situation, I would have let that guy have it. But you didn't. And they want to hear about the hope that you have. We're all leading in different aspects, in different ways. Help us, God, to lead well. Also want to remind you that last week, Pastor Fidel taught a Christian man as a husband. And I've had so many emails. My email got blown up this week with people saying, hey, did you record that? And yes, we did. And we're going to put it on a YouTube, the audio, and we're going to have last week's, this week's, next week's, and hopefully the following week, we're going to have YouTube links. So if you want any of the messages, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or all 4 of them, give your leader a heads up, and your leader of your group will email me, and I'll make sure that we get all those links sent out to all the leaders so they can send them out to you. So tonight, a Christian man as a father, and God the Father has a very special place in his heart for fathers. He knows exactly, what we're going through because he set the example for us. So if you'd welcome Pastor Fidel, and he's going to share and break the word open for us.
Thank you, Pastor. If you have your Bibles, would you please open them to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, and mark your spot there. And then Ephesians chapter 6. We will be in both of those spots before the night is over. And so I understand, like Pastor David said, that there was some request for last week's study on being a husband. But what he didn't tell you was all the wives that called that wanted those. And so that was kind of interesting. I think that's important. Ephesians chapter 6, we will start there. We've prayed and asked the Lord to bless our time. How many of you have bared with me for the last two times together? You put up with it? Good. Today, as David mentioned, we'll talk about being a dad. Now, it goes without saying that there are several different types of dads that are represented here. There is the looking forward to being a dad. You're here. You're looking forward to it one day. There is the existing dad with little ones at home, let's say 18 and under. And there's the dad that has grown-up kids. They have grown up, they're married, perhaps moved on. And then, of course, there is the father of a blended family. And so for the short time that we will be together today, it's impossible for me to discuss every single facet of it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stay in the middle of that. And there are so many resources that can address the blended family that is available to you. If you don't know of any, make sure that you talk with either Pastor David or call the office here. Because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the one that wants to be a dad and the one from a blended family perspective, but somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. And one way or another, it's going to apply to all of us. Now, here's what a couple of things that I am going to tell you is, as we go through this subject, I may, and it will be unintentional, I may insult you. I may cause some anger to rise up in you. I may frustrate you. I may correct you. I may challenge the position that you currently hold when it comes to being a dad. But in all things, my hope through this time together is to equip you. If there is a subject, if there is a topic, if there is a point, a phrase, a comment that kind of gets to you just a little bit, it's good. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't expect you to agree with everything that I say. But I want you to come to the place where you establish your view on fathering, on being a dad, based upon the Word. Because we come from such a variety of backgrounds. I come from a family of 10. I'm the baby. I'm the last one. And I asked my dad why they stopped after I was born. And he said that when I came out and they showed me to him, my dad, he said he looked at me, he showed me to my mom and said, honey, it ain't going to get any better than this one right here. That's what I said to myself, and so I don't know. But I come from a family of 10. And I come from an old school upbringing. Dad, he's there. My mom and dad were married 59 years. They missed 60 by a couple of months because my mom went home to be with the Lord. But I grew up in an angry home. My mom, being married at the age of 15 to my dad, had been physically abused by her father, my grandfather, who was an alcoholic. And she made a decision early on that when she got married, she would never let a man ever dominate her. And so I grew up in a home where mom ruled with an iron fist. I grew up in an angry home. My brother, closest in age to me, my brother Jesse, 5 years older than I, were the last two left at home. All the others had been grown up and married. And one of the things that my brother Jesse and I, this is before my mom and dad came to know the Lord. One of the things that my brother Jesse and I knew just about every day was we're going to get a beating. We just don't know why, and we don't know with what. And so I grew up with that. I grew up with the life of let's make mom happy. As long as mom is happy, we're safe. But it didn't take much. But I must say that later on in life, after she had a stroke, my mom came to know the Lord, and much changed. But my dad, when my mom had a stroke, I was married already and grown up and had a couple of kids. But my dad was 5'4", weighed about 120 pounds all his life. He had been a horse jockey when he was young. And then later, when we moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, he went to work at the Sands Hotel as a gardener. I learned a lot from my dad. He was my hero. No other man on the face of this earth that I respected more than my dad. Max Gomez. My dad was the man that displayed to me what it meant to be a husband. What it meant to be a husband that loved his wife unconditionally. And what it meant to be a father that loved his children. I grew up with that. My dad, at every game I ever played that I can remember, my parents at all of my games, baseball. My dad taking care of my mom when she had a stroke and she was bound to a wheelchair and she put on excessive weight. And yet my dad, 5'4", 120 pounds, would find a way to maneuver her into the wheelchair and bathe my mom and take care of her. My dad, he showed me what it was like for a man to love his wife when she could do nothing for him, nothing. There was no physical relationship. But my dad, I can picture my dad. He's got this cleaner, this rag on his shoulder, and he's cooking. And he pushes my mom up to the table in the wheelchair, and she's there, and my dad is putting the plate in front of her and cutting up the tortillas for her and feeding her because she can't feed herself. And my dad, when I would visit Las Vegas, my dad and I would sit out in the backyard and do devotions together. But he had to take care of mom first. I had that kind of example. He's my hero, my dad. But not everybody had that. Not everybody grew up with that kind of upbringing. There are some of you that, like a man named Joe, that was a professional football player. He grew up in a home where dad told him over and over and over again how worthless he was, how incompetent he was, how ignorant, how dumb he was, and how he would never become anything. And Joe tells the story that every time that he would score a touchdown, he would take that football and he would slam it on the ground. There, Dad, I did become something. I did make something of my life. The thing is, Joe's dad had been dead for 15 years. Some of you grew up with that and slapped around by an alcoholic dad, watching your dad beat up on your mom, watching your dad leave your home. So I understand that. But we can't base our parenting on our past. We can't. Whether good or bad, you're you. God created you unique. You're not your father. You're not that person. You are you. You are God's workmanship, created in Christ. So you're not perfect, but you're not your dad. And you're not the type of dad, you shouldn't be the type of dad that your friends have told you that you ought to be. You're not the type of dad, you shouldn't be the type of dad that entertainment tells you that you ought to be, that the media tells you that you ought to be. Like I said, much less your past. You have a unique opportunity. If you grew up with a different kind of upbringing than I did, you can break that cycle. You have an enemy that no matter what you do as far as a dad, you have an enemy that hates you and therefore hates your children. And he is doing everything that he can and will continue to do everything that he can to dismantle your family piece by piece, to rip apart the unity that God is seeking to establish in your marriage, in your parenting, in your fathering. This enemy of yours is seeking to destroy, to control your attitude, your mindset, because he knows that your children, they represent the future of Christianity. And if he can tear up, if he can rip apart, if he can dismantle you as a father to your children will grow up scarred just like you did, if that's the case. There is a structure that God has established, that through this structure that he's established, God would work, God would bless. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, the Bible lays it out clearly, and he says that God is the head over Jesus. Jesus is the head over man. Man is the head over woman. And in Ephesians chapter 6, you'll see that you are the head of the family. And so there is a purpose, there's a design that God has established through which he can work in your life as a father, as heaven's representative in the home, so that you can lead your family in a way that is contrary to much of what this world represents. But you have an enemy. And this enemy is going to do anything and everything that he can to divide you, to distract you, to discourage you, to ultimately destroy you as a father through frustration, through discouragement, because you will look at your child and you will say, they're never going to change. Again, with the understanding that there are those of you here that want to be dads, and there are those of you here that are grandparents, and there are those here that are grandfathers, and there are those that are here that are from blended families. I know that. But there's an enemy. So what is the family supposed to look like? What is it that the children are supposed to do? What is it that the father is supposed to do in this structure? Remember, you have an enemy that is going to do and is doing everything that he can to dismantle this thing called the family piece by piece. Look with me at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. I want you to see, first of all, the Apostle Paul. And remember, you can't establish your parenting, or you as a child cannot establish your position based upon anything else but the Bible. Notice that the Bible says, children, verse 1, watch now, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. I want you to see, first of all, that it says, children, obey your parents. Dads, would you do me a favor and would you underline that? Children, obey your parents. Would you underline that? And off to the side, somewhere where you can write this, would you write this down? It does not say, parents, obey your children. I want you to notice that. Because in many homes today, the children are running the home. And we have, in many cases, if I can make up this word, we have adultified the children. And in many homes, it's the children that are telling the parents what to do. And notice that it says here, children, obey your parents in the Lord, because this is right. The word right is the word holy. Verse 2, honor your father and your mother. Children, you're given two things to do. You are given the command to obey, and you're given the command to honor. Here is the words. Here is the principle behind it. Obey. That's the act. I act in obedience. But what is the attitude behind the action? The attitude behind the action is the word honor. It's the word value. It's the word esteem. So children, listen. So when mom or dad says something that is in keeping with the Lord, not making something up, but giving you an instruction, giving you a guideline, giving you a boundary that is in keeping with the word, you have the responsibility to obey. But it gives you with the right attitude. Like the story of the little boy in an airplane. Maybe you heard about this 5-year-old little boy. He's running up and down the middle aisle in an airplane. He's running. You ever been in an airplane like that? Just having a great time, laughing and screaming and keeping you awake. And so finally the mom gets tired of this little boy running up and down the aisle in the airplane and grabs the little boy and sits him down in the seat, buckles him in, sits him down, and says, now you sit there and behave. And the little boy crosses his arms and he says, on the outside, I'm sitting down. But on the inside, I'm still running up and down this airplane. When we obey, what is the attitude? What is it that we as children, the children, what is it that they're called to do? To obey, to submit to the legitimate authority that God has given to you, the dad, the mom, the parents. You have legitimate authority over that child that is still living at home. God has given you that authority. And he has given to you the responsibility as a child to obey with the right heart. The problem is that our children, when they're born into the world, they're born with a sinful heart. The Bible says in the book of Psalm chapter 51, I was sinful from the time that my mother conceived me. Our children are born with a nature to disobey. It's natural. It's inbred. There's no child that I know of that comes out of the womb that says, oh man, I have the greatest dad, the greatest mom on the face of this earth, and I am going to obey everything that they tell me to do. I don't know of any child like that. But I know of many children that are the opposite of that. How many times have you heard this example? Did you ever have to teach your child to be selfish? Did you ever run your child through a course that is 6 easy steps on how to be selfish? It's something that is inbred. It's something that is very natural. Some of you have had kids recently, and you say things like this, oh man, my child is an angel. My child is an angel, yeah? Well, as their legs get longer, their wings are going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. Terrible twos, terrible twos. It's not terrible twos that when they get to 2 years of age. It's terrible twos after they're 2 days old. It just takes 2 years for them to be able to verbalize it. But you've been given a sinner. It's your child, it's your daughter, it's your son, but you've been given a smaller version of you. They're just a smaller version of you. And the challenge then becomes that as the enemy is seeking to dismantle your family, that you look at this sinful little body that has been given to you, and you become frustrated with her, to the point that you become discouraged, to the point that you start thinking, why did we, remind me, why did we want to have a child? And see, you have been called by God to take this little sinner that's a boy or a girl, and you have been called by God to prioritize this little one in such a way that you train this little one in the structure that God has established, where it's God over Jesus, Jesus over man, man over the wife, and man and wife, husband and wife, if that's the case, that governs the family. You have been given that charge. You are the one that is to be the coach. It is through you, the dad. It is through you, the father, that God seeks to bring the message of heaven into the family. Theologically, it's what you see in the Bible where the fathers were ruling the home in a biblical way, not domineering, not in a tyrannical way. But it's the father that God has designed. It's you, the father, that God has designed that would be that person, that one that would receive the message from heaven, and you would disseminate that message to your children. Do you see why it's so important that the enemy remove you from that? Do you see why the enemy works so hard to discourage you, to anger you at your children, to get you to the point where you just want to just walk out? And man, if that's the way you want to be, I've had it with you, man. Just be that way then. Because you're the channel through which God is working in the family. Never to eliminate the wife or the mom, but the husband is the primary source through which God works. Verses 1 and 2 Children, you've been given 2 commands to obey, but to obey with the right heart. And you, the father, you have to guard your heart, that you don't let this person that is clay in your hands get under your skin to such a degree that you just let them have their way, that you walk out on them. No, it's the future. You're dealing with the future. Now, as a grandparent, maybe you as a dad, maybe you didn't do the best that you think you could have. Your grandfather? God gives grandkids for a second opportunity, if the Lord so allows. So you've been given this sinner that you can train and to prepare for the future. Now, understand why verse 2 is so important. You're preparing your child for the future. Why? Because look at verse 2. Honor your father and your mom, which is the first commandment with a promise. Watch now. That it may be well with you and you may live long on this earth. You are preparing this little man, this little woman to grow to be the kind of a person that is able to be blessed by God. Because you've taught your child, this is the structure of God. This is the system of God. This is the structure that God has established. These are the boundaries that God has given to you. He hasn't established boundaries to hem you in, but to allow you to enjoy life to the greatest capacity. You have taken the time to instruct your child in that way. And not perfect by no means. As you've heard me say before, my wife and I, our first one, that just this month turned 40 years old, he was our prodigal. Had to go get him out of jail. Here I am pastoring. And charges on guns and drugs and the whole thing. I had to go get him out of jail, Broward County Jail. So you can be the best parent that you can be, but your child will still have to make decisions. When you think of the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve disobeyed, and who was their father? None other than God. But they still chose to rebel. So maybe you look at this and go, okay, well then, I'm preparing my child. I'm doing what I can. I need to do what I can. Because they will come to a place where they will start making decisions on their own. That's the idea, you see. The idea is that one day your children will turn 18 years of age. And they're going to stand at the front door of your home. And you know what they're going to say? They turned 18? Maybe. They're going to wave goodbye. And some of you might say, good riddance. Goodbye. Go to college, move on, whatever. You want to be able to step back and say, Lord, I did everything I could. I did the best that I could. If my children are going to rebel against you, if they're going to walk away from you, it's not going to be because I contributed to it, because of bad parenting, or because I'm throwing fits, or I'm being angry. It's going to be because they need to make decisions. And so you train your children, you prepare your children for the future because you want them to enjoy verse 2 and verse 3. It's the first commandment with a promise. It's the only commandment with a promise. Children, listen carefully. If you will do what verse 1 says, obey, submit to the legitimate authority of mom and dad, and you do it with the right heart, it's out of the 10 commandments, it's the only commandment with a promise. That if you do this, life will go well with you. The quality of life. God says you'll have a good life, not a perfect life, not a problem-free life, not a sinless life, but Deuteronomy chapter 4, Moses says, if you will obey the commandments of God, if you will follow the statutes of God, life will go well for you. Listen, children, it's better to obey your parents because God will provide for you a good life. The quality of life. And watch this now, not only the quality of life, but the quantity of life. Your life won't be cut short. Your life, it'll go well with you. And you'll live a long life. It's the only commandment with a promise. But listen to this. In Exodus chapter 20, here's what the Bible says. Honor your mom and your dad, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord has given you. You want to be blessed? You want to have a good life? The Bible tells you honor your mom and dad. Listen to Exodus chapter 21. If anyone attacks their mom or their dad, they shall be put to death. If anyone curses their mom or their dad, they shall be put to death. Do you know that you don't have any illustrations of that happening in the Bible? Do you know why? Because the kids took it serious. There was a consequence for disobedience. There were guidelines that were established. And we're living today in some difficult times, folks. Remember, you're preparing your children that they can be the kind of children where God is able to just bless their life. You are part of that. But we're living in a culture today that is being fueled by rebellion. You are raising children today in a culture where just about, now I'm not going to go global and say everything, but just about everything that is being fed to them through the eye, through the ears, is promoting a life that is disconnected from God. Just about everything, not everything, but just about everything that the television offers to your children has something to do with independence, disobedience to parents, living a life disconnected from God, being independent. Oh my goodness, do you remember that? Do you remember being 14, 15, and what is it that you couldn't wait for? You want to drive. Why? Because if you could just get to the point in life where you have your driver's license, you will finally be able to get away from your parents. Right? And then you get pulled over by the police, and who's the first people you call? Mom, I'm sorry. Independence. We're living in a culture where you need to be aware of this fact. And I don't need to elaborate on it way too much. The music. What type of music are your children listening to? Is the type of music that your children listening to, is it the type of music that is positioning them in such a way where God can pour out his blessings upon their life? Or is it the kind of music that is fueled by rebellion? Our children are being inundated, flooded with resist authority, question authority, challenge authority. You don't need anybody. You're smart enough. You're good enough. I looked up some of the words. Now again, I know better. I know better than to say every artist. I know better than that. But many of the artists that are being idolized by our children, musical artists, many of the musicians and singers that your daughters, your sons are looking up to are men and women that are very depraved, very anti-God. And the way that some of these girls dress that are influencing some of your young daughters are leading them to think that they have to look like that. They have to dress like that. Lest you think that I'm condemning, let me say this, I'm challenging you. to get involved with what your young daughters, young sons are listening to. Who are these people that they are putting up on a pedestal? Who are these musical people that they are admiring? Maybe not putting up on a pedestal, but they are admiring them. I went online, and I won't even tell you the name of the person. And I looked up some of the lyrics to some of this person's song, and I couldn't finish reading it. The things that this person wanted to do to another human being in a physical sense, I couldn't. And this is the number one rated hip hop artist that's on the charts right now. You've been given the charge by God to train up your child biblically. I don't know how involved you are, but do you have the right to control what your 18 and under children listen to? Absolutely. I don't know. Maybe I just come from an ancient era. But I'll be this honest with you, and I can tell you this here because it's just us guys here. I never had any problem. When our kids were at home, our son is 40, our daughter's 38, and our youngest is 31. And when they were all three living at home, I never felt bad. I never had a problem with. I was never embarrassed to go into either one of their rooms and just look. I looked under the bed. I looked under the mattress. I looked in their drawers. I monitored the music they listened to. I was aware of the friends that they were a part of. Now, this is what I could see or what I could do. When they left home, it was different. But I remember my daughter, she was, 15 maybe. And I pick up the phone. This is when back in the ancient days when you had a house phone. And I pick up the phone. My daughter's name is Andrea. A young man on the other end of the phone. I say, hello. And this young man says, can I speak to Andrea, my daughter? And I had a question. I said, why? Well, I want to give her a message. So I said, give it to me. I'll give it to her. I told my daughter when she was 15, 16 years old, I said, you can date. I don't have any problem with you dating. Whenever you do get ready to go out on a date, just tell me how I need to dress. Do I need to dress formally? Do I need to dress casually? Because I'm going with you. She didn't do a lot of dating. Now, some of you might say, that's a bit overboard. Could be. Could be. But I knew each one of my kids. And I knew which one needed to be guarded more than the other. And I knew in my heart, my conviction, if I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to make a mistake by overprotecting my children than underprotecting them. Now, I know that all of us are different. You have to know your child. And you cannot run your family like a dictator. You cannot. There's an element of trust in God. There has to be. But your child is crying out for boundaries. Trust me. I've been doing this long enough, and my kids are married and got their own kids now. A lot of it that we went through in parenting our kids is coming back to us 100-fold in the good. Because they're all three walking with the Lord, raising their families in the ways of the Lord. But was it a battle? Absolutely. There were some things that I would discuss with them and bargain with them about, but there were some things, no, this is the way it is. Dad's not going to take a step backwards when it comes to this, whatever that might be. So you're raising your children in a world that is very opposite in some ways, in many ways, than what you are training them to do. Do you understand why you must be involved? You cannot farm out the fathering. You cannot. They only have one dad. Now, again, I understand there's blended families and all. We could go in 100 different directions. But they only have one dad. You can't farm it out to somebody else. So then, having said that, children, obey your parents and do it in a way that is with the right heart. Why? Because if you do, you have a promise in verse 2 and verse 3. Now watch verse 4. I'm going to give you 4 things, dads, that you must do. That if you do these things, this is not a formula that's going to guarantee perfect children. But this is 4 points that the Apostle Paul gives to us in how we ought to raise our children. Notice with me, verse 4. And you, watch now, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. Did you notice this? Would you once again pull out your pen for me for just a second? And would you underline fathers? Would you underline that word? Number 1, as we go through the 4 points, fathers, encourage your children. But I want you to see, though, and you fathers, he's given you, dad, a responsibility. You, dads, you're not going to find a verse. You're not going to find a verse in the Bible where it says, moms, you need to do this. Fathers, because remember, you're the channel. God speaks down to the dad. Now, again, not making less of the mom. She plays an important part. But we're talking to you right now, the dad. So fathers, you're the pillar. You're the anchor. You're the binding that holds the family together. Did you notice, though, that it doesn't say church? It doesn't say, church, you do this. It doesn't say that. It says dads. It doesn't say daycare. Train up your children. It doesn't say daycare. Prepare your kids. It doesn't say government. Let the government do it. No, dads. You think your kids are going to remember everything you said? Probably not. But they'll remember the example that you set. Fathers, don't frustrate your children. It doesn't say anything about school. Let the school train up your kids. It doesn't say let the television. Do you know that the average, now again, average child, 18 and under, is going to watch approximately 30 hours of television a week? How much time do you spend with your child to balance that out? Because remember, what kind of biblically based information are they receiving from the television during those 30 hours? How much spirit-filled information are they receiving while they sit in front of the television for those 30 hours? How many of the programs that are coming through the airwaves from the television into their little mind is encouraging them to obedience to their mom and dad? If you are not countering that, if you're not offering a balance to that, then they're lopsided. Fathers, don't exasperate. Let me put it to you this way. Fathers, encourage your children. Encourage them in the things of the Lord. Don't exasperate. You know what that is? Don't frustrate them. There's several ways in which we can frustrate our kids. One of the ways that I find that we can frustrate our kids is making promises to them that we don't keep. I promise, I'm going to come home early from work, and I'm going to go with you to the park, and we're going to do this. We're going to go to the circus. We're going to go shopping. We're going to go to the mall, whatever. Sorry. Couldn't get off work. Now, there's exceptions. Of course there's exceptions. I'm talking about when it becomes the norm. The breaking of promises frustrates, exasperates kids, discourages kids. What else? When it becomes you have more than one child, you show favoritism. Oh, man. Why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you be as smart? Your sister, man, she's smart. She's got a 4-point-something grade point average. You got a .00 something average, whatever it is. Why can't you be like your sister? That's frustrating. That's humiliating. Wanting your kids to follow in your footsteps. You're an engineer. Oh, he's got to be an engineer. What if he don't want to be? What if he wants to be a missionary? Oh, no. I mean, no money, missionary. It's all about money. You went to this particular university. You graduated from this university, and your kids are going to go to that university if it kills you. What if they don't want to? What if they want to go to Bible college? What if they don't? Do you know that out of our 3 children, none of them have followed in my footsteps. I have one, our youngest, Matt. He works at the church, but he does all the construction. He did this. He built that cross. He hung that cross right there. He does all the remodeling. He has no calling, according to him, no desire to stand and preach in front of people. I thought that he would, or the other ones, but they didn't. How about not having time for them? You want to frustrate your kids? You don't have time. I ain't got time. I wish I had time. Oh, man, if I had more time. So your kids grow up without you in the stands watching them play football, soccer, surf, skate, whatever it might be. And you ain't got no time. What breaks the heart of a child is when they know that their friends' dads are there, but not their dad. That's exasperating. That's frustrating. And notice what he says, fathers, don't do that. You ought to encourage your child. Encourage how? Be an example. Be an example. Let them, and I'm not talking about in a hypocritical way, not at all, man, but be an example where your kids know, man, my dad's in the Word. My dad, he comes home and he spends time in the Word and he prays. I see him praying with mom, whether it's the biological or the blended, whatever it might be. Man, my dad's in the Word. My dad prays. My dad goes to church. My dad's a part of the men's ministry. My dad's a part of the parking ministry. My dad's a part of what Pastor Dave was talking about, helping single moms fix their cars or whatever it is. Being an example in the words that you say. When's the last time you spoke a blessing to your child? You know how in the Old Testament, where the dad would put his hand on the head of the child and speak a blessing and talk about the future. Son, I want to give you my blessing. Oh, man, you crazy, man. You don't know my kid. Maybe speaking a blessing would give them hope. The blessing, it's the anticipation of a good life. I'm putting my hands on you, and not to choke you. I'm putting my hands on you to speak a blessing with the anticipation that God's going to be a blessing in your life. And in the name of Jesus, I want you to know that as I lay my hands on you, and I want you to know that I'm committed to you, son, daughter. I want you to know that I'm with you in the good times and in the bad times. See, there's a difference between praise and encouragement. Praise is, oh man, you scored a touchdown. Oh man, you did so good. You got an A. You got an A. I praise you. Praise is on the basis of something that's been done. Encouragement is, I love you. Not because of anything that you've done. You're just my child. And I love you. It's the speaking well. It's encouraging them. Encouraging them through speaking a blessing. I have found that our kids, they're looking for a cheerleader. They are. They're looking for somebody to let them know you are doing so good. Even during times when things are not as well as you think they ought to be, there's something about your child. There's something about your son. There's something about your daughter that you can look at and say, I am really, really proud of you for doing this right here. Maybe it's just breathing. I don't know what it could be. But you look at him and you go, I'm the biggest fan that you have. Your child ought to know that you're in his corner. You are cheering her on. If your child is looking for a cheerleader and is not finding it in you, they'll look somewhere else. And they'll find it. Because somebody will tell your daughter that she's special. If you don't do it at home, there's an emotional tank that your daughter and your son has that should only be filled by you and mom. But when that emotional tank is not being filled at home, it'll be filled by somewhere or somebody else. Why do you think the gangs are so popular? Why do you think the gangs are so effective? Make you feel special. You're something. You're strong. You're courageous. You're powerful. And it feeds that ego, that soul. Oh, your child ought to know, man, you're their biggest cheerleader. Because if they don't feel like you're their fan, they'll go to a different fan base. But don't forget the old saying. Don't forget the old saying. Rules without a relationship is what? It's just rebellion. It leads to rebellion. I'm not talking about just setting rules. I'm not talking about you got to follow these step 1 through 10, and if you do this, then everything will be okay. No, I'm talking about a relationship. Jesus said in John chapter 14, if you love me, then you'll obey my commandments. See, it's relationship. Getting to know your son, your daughter, sitting on the edge of the bed with them. Tell me, talk to me. Let me tell you about my day. Have you ever asked your child to forgive you for something? You don't know how many times, man, especially with, if you have more than one kid, maybe you'll see this or understand this or agree with it. Our first child, we kind of practiced on him. I made so many mistakes, man. You don't know how many times, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, that I got on my knees and I said, Gabriel, I need you to forgive me. The way that I talked to you, the words that I used, I am so sorry. It's relationship. It's them seeing you in your weakness, but in your weakness that God has made strong in your life. I have a friend by the name of Mike, and Mike Freeman. I met Mike Freeman about 20 years ago, the pilot, captain for Delta. He moved to the state of Washington, and he was flying from Washington to Korea and back. And Mike was the kind of a guy that he flew these fighter jets in the Navy. He saw some action and battles and everything, land on aircraft carriers. He had all the experience, in flying. So he ends up flying for Delta, and he's the captain. And about 20 years ago, we were having these conversations about being a leader, being a dad. And he said something to me, man, that just stuck to my heart. He said this: there's sometimes as a captain, I have 300 passengers on my plane. And we're coming up to a storm, and there's times that I know the storm is there because we can see it on the radar or whatever, and we can go around it, over it, under it, whatever, and we're okay. He said, but there's some times that, bam, we're hit with the storm, and it just comes out of nowhere. Turbulence. And he said, I will look out on the wings, and the wings on this aircraft will be doing things that scare me. He said, but you know what I have to do? I have to get on the intercom. And I have to pick up the intercom, and I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently experiencing some severe turbulence, but there's nothing to fear. These aircraft were designed to handle such pressure. Relax. We'll have you down safely on the ground in no time. And he says, and then I hang up the intercom. I look out the window and I go, oh God, you need to help me because I don't know how to do this. You're the captain. And every now and then, the co-captain, if it's the case, your wife, there'll be turbulence. There'll be difficulty. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been in an airplane when we were going through some turbulence that I thought it was my last day on earth. And you know the first people I look to see what they're doing? Flight attendants. Because if I look over in severe turbulence and I see the flight attendant smiling, we're okay. But have you ever been on a flight when the flight attendants are freaking out and screaming? There's been times that I have confessed sins that I haven't even committed yet. I'm so scared. It's relationship. I'm asking you to prioritize your child. It's the future of Christianity, that son of yours, the daughter of yours. They're the future of the gospel. When you say, I don't have time for my child, you're saying, I don't have time for the future of the gospel. What's greater than that? What's more important than that? What television show is more important than that? What job is more important than that? What personal recreational time is more important than you investing your life into the life of your children? That's not to say that you have to abandon everything else, but the balance. Secondly, notice what he says. He says, first of all, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Verse 4, and you fathers, watch now, don't provoke your children to wrath. Watch now. But bring them up. Secondly, fathers, nurture, cultivate, develop. Let me give you 4 areas in which you ought to be cultivating, developing, and nurturing your children intellectually, physically, socially, and spiritually. In each one of those areas, you ought to be connected intellectually. What is happening inside of the mind? What is going on in their brain? What are they being impacted by? What is it that they're absorbing into their brain? Physically, what's happening in their life physically? Is there anything happening? Are they just sitting in front of the television playing video games 24 hours a day? Is there any physical activity? Are there any responsibilities that your children have within the home? Remember, you're training them in the structure of God. You're preparing them so that they will be exposed to the blessings of God. Socially, how are they getting along with other children? What about their friends? Who are their friends? Who do they connect with? What about their school? Socially at school, the kind of things that they're learning at school, spiritually. How much time are you spending with your children spiritually? remember, they look up to you. They think you're close to God. And so you've been given that responsibility. I should say, you've been given that privilege. In Proverbs 22, train up a child according to their uniqueness. Like I mentioned, we have 3. If you have more than one child, you know, man, they're different. They're all different. My oldest one that was the prodigal, he wouldn't talk to you. He wouldn't say a word. He would grunt. No matter what you said, no matter what you asked, it was, yeah, yeah. My daughter, oh man, my daughter. My 2 boys, it would take an atom bomb to wake them up and to get them out of bed. My daughter, oh, she had her clothes all laid out before she went to bed. She'd get up and have everything ready, and she was ready for school, waiting for my youngest one. Oh, couldn't get him out of bed. My oldest one, he had a tendency to lean towards the things of the world. My daughter, not so much. My youngest son, much less. Train up a child in their own unique way. Get to know who they are. Look at the number 3. Bring them up. Watch 3 words in the training. Fathers, this word training, discipline. You know what word comes from the word discipline? The word disciple. We don't have time, but you can go through the book of Proverbs and read Proverbs chapter 13. If you spare the rod, you hate your child. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Proverbs 22, the child's heart has a tendency to do wrong, but the rod of discipline removes it far from him. Hebrews chapter 12, the Lord disciplines everybody that he loves. Discipline according to the uniqueness of your child. There's got to be order in your home, gentlemen. It doesn't say parents obey your children. It says children obey your parents. But what if they don't know the boundaries? What if they don't know that this is not acceptable, and then they step into it and then you throw a fit? See, discipline is not you throwing an angry fit. Discipline is you taking the opportunity to disciple your child. It's difficult when you personally, as a dad, are not connected to the things of God. So that when it comes time to discipline, you lose it. You get angry. And be careful, gentlemen, be careful with this, please. Be careful. I've heard this before. I've heard this before, and it breaks my heart. I've heard men and women, moms and dads say this. You're not going to believe the way I was raised. The way I was raised, oh man, my old man, he'd take whatever he could find, and he'd beat me with it. And so, do you think I'm going to beat my child? I will never lay hands on my child. Oh, okay. So your theology is based on your personal experience. You can't do that. And nobody would ever say, beat your child. That's not only is that biblically sinful, but it's illegal. That's just wrong. We're talking about discipling your child through discipline based upon the uniqueness of your child, based upon the age, based upon the ability to understand. You're the coach. You're the trainer. You're the captain. You're the shepherd of the flock. And he says, train up a child, discipline, set up boundaries. Lastly, he in the training, and watch now, and the admonition of the Lord. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, I'm just going to read this to you. In verse 1, this is the commandment, and these are the statutes and judgments which the Lord your God has commanded to teach you, that you may observe them in the land which you are crossing over to possess. Watch now, that you may fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I commanded you, and your son and your grandson all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Now look with me down at verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You're going to talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Bring them up in the admonition or in the instruction. Lastly, let me leave you with this. God has given you a ball of clay that is your child's brain that you are supposed to make deposits spiritually into their life. There should be nothing that is more important than that. And you as a child should honor and obey your parents that they might be able to speak into your life. And as they do, you will find that Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1 and 2 becomes a reality in your life. Life will go well with you, and you will live a long life. Would you pray with me? Lord, as we have spent this time together, there's so much, God, there's so much to learn. There's so many ways in which we can approach this. There's so many thoughts. Some of us, Lord, we have already failed as dads. We have fallen short. But God, you are still able to hit a target even with a crooked arrow. And so, God, help us that if we've lost some ground in our parenting, that we would catch up, that we would do right by you, that we would prioritize our family, that we would be the kind of children, Lord, that obey our parents, that we would honor them with the right heart. Thank you for each one of my brothers. I pray you bless them in Jesus' name. Amen.
Pastor Fidel had mentioned storms. And the good thing about storms is every storm has a beginning and every storm has an end. And it won't always be the way that it is now. I had a guy come up to me maybe 2 weeks ago and he said, you know, I'm really having trouble with my 16-year-old son. He's been skipping school. He's had bad grades. He won't listen to his mother. And I'm ready to strangle him. I'm not quite sure what to do. I'm losing my temper. And he says, what do you think I ought to do? And I said, I think you ought to take him out for a hamburger. What? I said, and just as Pastor Fidel said, rules without the relationship leads to rebellion. You know, at 16 years old, a young man is ready to make his own decisions. He's been trained, he's been disciplined, he has a track that he's running on, and the only way a young man is going to change is if he wants to. He needs to have someone in his life that he looks up to who is leading the way by example, and to build that relationship with that young man and to build the camaraderie together, to live life together, to experience life together. It's all through relationships. You know, with your wife at home, it's about that loving relationship, giving her all the things that she needs to succeed and building that relationship together. Life is all about relationships. And if you don't have a relationship, rules will not get you very far. Because once kids turn about 12 or 13, all of a sudden, you don't know everything. And they are wired to make their own independent decisions. So you need to be able to transition from being a coach to be more of a consultant, to provide leadership, to provide that example. Pastor Fidel also said, you know, when was the last time you asked one of your kids to forgive you? And I remember back when my daughter was at CCA, she was a graduating senior, and she had to give her testimony for something. And she was giving her testimony, and I remember praying with her when she was a little girl to receive Jesus, you know, on the side of the bed. And so I knew that she was a Christian. But her testimony, when she really develop that personal relationship with the Lord was not at 6 years old or at 11 years old when we prayed with her again, but during another time where she saw an example and knew that her relationship with the Lord needed to go to that next level. And as she gave her testimony, she shared a few things about her family. And she said, I remember the day my dad asked me to forgive her for the way that I had spoken to her. And out of all the things that she could have said about me, it was my dad asked me to forgive her. And what an impression that made, to be humble. You need to teach your kids how to love Jesus, how to be humble, how to be a servant, how to be marriageable, how to be employable. There's all kind of things that we can teach our kids to really help them to have all the tools that they need to build a solid foundation and to be able to build well. I was writing a paper for one of my online college classes, and it was about parenting, and I had mentioned in there, someday I'm going to write a book, and the title's going to be Too Much, Too Little, Too Late. You know, sometimes, you know, my daughter, for instance, we have a contract that if my daughter, I have 4 daughters, and when they turn 16, if they're in good relationship with Jesus, they're in a good relationship at home, if they're going to church every week and they're doing well in school and living in a respectful way, that we're going to contribute $3,000 to each of them to buy their first car. And, you know, for the first 3 daughters, that worked fine. Then my last daughter, Elizabeth, said, you know, my friend at school, when she turned 16, her dad bought her a BMW. And I put my arm around her. I said, honey, do you think they may adopt you? But she worked hard, and we matched the $3,000 that she was able to raise, and we matched it, and she was able to get her first car. But pray for your kids, and most of all, teach your kids how to pray. Because if your children don't have this relationship, a lot of this is going to be very difficult. And until they get this established, they're always going to flounder through life. So teach them how to pray. Teach them how to seek the Lord. Teach them how to serve. Teach them how to be humble. Teach them to consider others as more important than themselves. So the best time to start is now. Put a plan into effect. Go buy your kids a hamburger. Build that relationship with them. Pour into them. Go to their games. Invest time with them. You know, and they learn best, you know, especially young men. They learn best visually by seeing an example. You know, they'd rather see an example. They'd rather see a sermon than just to hear one. So God bless you guys. Your groups, your questions are here back at the sound booth. If you want to volunteer to be on the outreach on-call list, go see Andrea. If you're under 18, there's a cookie in the back for you. If you're signed up on the list, there's one for you too. God bless you guys.